Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we are in Europe, in Barcelona. I haven't, and as far as I know, nobody's done a podcast called Surfing in the 60s. So we're going to stick to running. Guy's had an interesting life, very eclectic, lots of travel, and involved in the sport through his activities, advertising, working with athletes, and creating a very iconic running and sports videos that you may recognize. Today, welcome on the podcast, guy specialized in 800 meters and on down, two-time All-American record holder, Hall of Fame at his college. Very interesting guy. Welcome, Vince Engel.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah. We'll also talk about your book, which is Elixir Runner Stories, which is a great thing for runners, everybody telling stories. And I'm going to go see a few friends this weekend, including some sprinters. Telling stories come back and the times change and the stories crisscross and not everybody remembers the same things or some things at all.
Exactly.
Tell people about you starting in the 60s, how you got involved in running.
First, I'd like to start with that famous Red Smith sports writer quote of, as we get older, the faster we ran in our youth. So if some of the times that I claim or races won or lost might be a little mixed up, it's been a number of years since my racing career ended. I played basketball, baseball in my youth, and eventually gave up baseball. I didn't particularly like it because I pitched, and on the off days when you weren't pitching, there was nothing to do except sit on the bench. Didn't like that. Basketball, I probably wasn't good enough. And the coach said, why don't you go out for cross country? It'll build up your stamina for the season. And I think it was his polite way of saying, find another sport. I went out. We had a very talented team, George Gibbs, Gary Tuttle, great coach, Jim Hunt. I instantly fell in with the team, and suddenly I was on varsity, and that meant I was going to letter and get a letterman's jacket. George Gibbs, Gary Tuttle, they were the leaders of the team, and it was a very good team, in fact. Fortunately, it was my junior year. I was able to make the varsity and get a letterman's jacket. That was a big deal back then. You could proudly wear it around school and hopefully attract some girls. Didn't work that well for me, but...
You had much success on track then in high school. What do you remember about there in the mid-60s in terms of what training the cross-country team did and what was on your feet?
Most of the time barefoot. We ran a lot barefoot, even on pavement, asphalt and stuff. Not only do we think it was lighter, less weight to carry around, it was just, I don't know, we thought it was cool. And being surfers, your feet were pretty tough anyways. But most of our training was done at a park in Ventura, Royal Verde Park, which is a little over a mile from the school. It was very hilly, beautiful park, and our cross-country course was up there. So we ran a lot of hill repetitions, mile repeats on the grass, things like that. Jim Hunt was our high school coach, and later, obviously, Gary and I's college coach. He worked us pretty good. I didn't enjoy it because I wasn't a really good cross-country runner at the time. So it was mostly chasing Gibbs and Gary and a couple other runners. But yeah, it was fun.
You talked about the team being good, but it was extraordinarily good. You were nationally ranked.
Yeah. Our track team was rated by the Los Angeles Times as the second best dual meet team in the nation, or at least the state of California, second to Mirror High School in Pasadena or Altadena. Yeah, and we had Coach Hunt produce the second and fourth best pole vaulters in the nation. Great sprinter, Ray C.A., who anchored our half-mile relay and ran 21-1 for the 220. A couple of sub-50 quarter milers, me in the half at 154, Gary and Gibbs in the 2 mile in the 9:20s, Dennis Lyons, the miler, who was about 4:22. We ended up winning the Bellflower, then it's called the Bellflower National Relays, and setting the best time in the nation for the 4 mile relay, just breaking 18 minutes, which back then was a big deal. And cross country, we ended up losing to Aviation High School in the CIF championships. They didn't have a state meet back then. By 1 point, it was tough. Gary fell at the start of the race and got trampled by this herd of runners who were sprinting across the lawn, Long Beach State. And I ended up getting 6th, and Gary was 10th, and George Gibbs was 12th. But Aviation ended up beating us by 1 point. It's terrible.
And let's remind everybody what it was like. Was that popsicle sticks and you didn't know?
Oh, yeah.
You didn't know until the end, till they put the scores up, what the score was? Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Coach Hunt, his clipboard, and he's frantically trying to figure out. Yeah, you're just anticipating. And then unfortunately, you have to get on the second place dais on the award stand and accept the trophy and try and look like they're happy. But we were very disappointed.
I want to talk about your personal view on competition in that era, but I also want to ask about, because of that great success and recognition for the team, how cool was track? How big a sport was it compared to the usual basketball, football, baseball ruling the high school press and everything?
I've got a little bit of press in the local papers. We tended to be ignored a bit when they'd have the rankings in the Los Angeles Times until suddenly, obviously, some sports writer discovered our team and stuff. But yeah, we'd get a few people if there was a baseball game on at the same time, and the baseball field was next to the track, so you get some spectators. But my parents never went to a meet or anything. Gary's mom, fortunately, she went all the time and took photos. So any photos that I have from that time are usually hers. Yeah, it's the loneliness of a long distance runner certainly comes to life back then, especially cross country. I do remember one time in our home course, the cheerleaders showed up for some reason in a cross country meet. We were so embarrassed. It was just,
It didn't seem to fit.
No.
We had them show up in just the middle of the season, the individual conference championship, and they were the only one from any school. And I was glad they were there, but yeah, it just didn't fit in that time frame.
sure they meant well, but it was just so funny. They didn't have a clue what was going on, I think. But back then, you weren't running for anybody else but yourself and your teammates. Although our senior year, between cross country and track, prior to that, we never would work out, or I wouldn't. We'd go surfing, and summers were always spent surfing, not running. But our senior year, we got pretty serious, Gary and I. And that's how we really clicked and became really good friends through that cross country season. In between, he played basketball, and he was a pretty good player on the varsity basketball team, even though he's pretty short. He was a good outside shooter. We decided we would meet for a morning run, and that way in the afternoon I could go surfing. So we'd meet, but we'd time it. So we'd come sprinting back. We only ran probably 3 miles the most, but we'd run up to the park and rest a little bit, then run back. But we'd time it so when all the girls were walking to school, we'd run past, and occasionally we'd take off our shirts thinking we were going to impress them, and we were two skinny little runts. Sure, they were totally unimpressed, but that helped. We'd race. When we run up and then run back from the park, and it would be an all-out race between Gary and myself. Occasionally somebody else might join us, but we get friends who beat their horns as they're driving to school at us and wave and stuff, and occasionally get something thrown at us, which happened. Most runners go through that. And occasionally we met on the weekends, but most of the time we didn't really run on the weekends. I'd usually run up to Gary's house, have breakfast at his house, and then he'd run back to my house, and we'd have breakfast at my house. And then he'd go back and usually practice basketball or something, or go surfing.
Yeah. I just want to ask one more thing about that era. With this track being still the second class sport yet, and your team was so good, and you had all these people, and what got all those people to the track team? It sounded like you must have had some of the best athletes.
Yeah, Coach Hunt, he was always looking out. And they used to have the President's Fitness Awards.
Yes.
And he did a 600-yard run. And the first time I met Coach Hunt, I was in the PE class. I was barefoot on the grass, and you ran up around the baseball field and back, and that was about 600 yards. And I won. And he said, "Oh, you should think about coming out." And I thought, yeah, okay. Back then, I think it was such an innocence, not only in the sport, but athletes. We didn't really know anything. And you ran barefoot because it was easier than wearing your basketball shoes, which are the low top canvas Condors, and didn't really have any sophisticated shoes at all until my senior year in track. I remember asking my mom and dad, I wanted a pair of these Adidas spikes, and they were going to cost $16. And I remember all my dad said was, "We're going to buy you shoes just so you can wear them out." They got me the shoes, and I was in heaven. But prior to that, I'd run a lot of races if they'd allow it. A lot of times officials wouldn't allow you to run barefoot on a dirt track or a cinder track. But we just take the balls of our feet, and even ran Mount Sac Invitational barefoot, which our team won that year. Yeah, I don't know how I did it. I couldn't do that today.
That's great. I want to ask about through high school, your running, your tactical racing approach, and your feeling on competition. Of course, team losing by a point's worse than losing by 10 probably, and you hate to lose. Well, it's not the surfer persona maybe to be hyper competitive. I don't know, but how was that for you?
At first, I did my very first track race. I won, and I had no idea what I was doing. And coach just said, "Stick with this guy, Ray Garcia." So I stuck with him. And then all of a sudden, people are yelling on the sidelines with about 50 yards to go, "Come on." So I picked it up, and I ended up winning. And afterwards, everybody's congratulating. And that feels good, especially the sprinters or the field event guys we had, which were really good. And they're slapping you on the back and talking about, "Oh man, that's great." And George Gibbs, who was our number one runner and nationally ranked miler at that time, he'd run like 4:24 or something as a sophomore or junior. Back then, that was a big deal. And he started talking to me and paying attention, and I liked that. But at the end of my junior year, I remember this distinctly. Sitting on the pole vault pit with Coach Hunt, I said to Coach, "I want to try and get to the CIF finals." That's like the state. I remember he just looked at me and very matter-of-factly said, "Do what I tell you to do, and I'll get you there. I promise." You know, and this high school kid and your coach, you're like, you believe him. And sure enough, he got me there, but it was a slow process. And our league was particularly tough in the 880 or the 800 to 880 back then. I have Dave Bogard, who ended up getting fourth in the state 2 years in a row. He was tough. He ran 152. And I ended up running 154, and I ran 1 mile, 2 miles. I ran that relay, and then I ran a 425, first time I ever ran the mile, and went out like a maniac and died, but still. Yeah, and to me, it was try and fight for the lead and hold it as long as you can. I didn't know any better, pretty unsophisticated as far as competition went. And I just remember I always had this weird thing in high school. I thought somehow, and I used to imagine this and even had dreams about it, that I'd wake up in the morning and suddenly any speed in my legs would be gone. So I would literally, sometimes at lunchtime, go down to the track and run the 220 as fast as I could to see, oh yeah, it's still there. I still got some speed in my legs. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, it said God looks after dogs, children, and the stupid. And that was me, the stupid.
Yeah, think even those times, if you'd have been really aggressive about it, you probably could have found a college to give you a scholarship. They didn't have that many scholarships, but I know people who ran on the times that found some place to go to school. But your journey was a little bit more of a bumble of getting to where you really had a great university career. Let's just go through that real quick. From what did you think you were going to do when you graduated high school?
Literally, up until my senior year, I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. I always had artistic talent, so I thought maybe something I could do with that. I don't know. But I was quick convinced, I'll work in a gas station. I don't care. And as long as I can surf. Suddenly, Gary started talking, and he had a couple of visits to schools. Occidental was one. I think maybe Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. I tagged along, and they talked to me, and then I did a polite, we looked at your transcripts, and you had some more. Cal Poly said they'd love to have me, but I would have to take a summer school class, and I wasn't going to do that because it would interfere with my surfing. Then all of a sudden, near the end of summer, my father got transferred from Ventura, where he's the store manager, to another Sears store, the main headquarters for Sears in Los Angeles. So we moved, and it was like Gary was going to Humboldt, and I hadn't applied or anything. I took the SAT, which is how clueless I was. I didn't even know what the SAT was and stuff. And I went to Santa Barbara High School, took the SAT, and did as good as I could have expected. Then my dad said, listen, go to this school at junior college, and we'll figure it out. So fortunately, he had called ahead, and I went to Citrus, and Ed Conley was a really good coach. Great guy. Vince O'Boyle was already there. He's a famous coach from UC Irvine, but a really good half miler and quarter miler. Hung out with him, met other runners, Pete Pedrosa, Earl Miller, guys who were pretty dedicated. Tracy Smith, obviously, you know who he was. He was there. He was taking a year off from Oregon State to get ready for the Olympics, 68 Olympics. He was training there, so I got to train with him. Boy, that was an eye-opening experience. I had a really good season, and won Mount Sac, set a record. Somebody told me, one of the old teammates said I was voted JC Runner of the Year or of the month. Everything was going well. And I'd get letters from Coach Hunt, who had now left Boyne and gone up, been recruited to be the head coach at Humboldt. Gary had a lot to do with that. They were both saying, you got to come up. Gary would write me letters all the time saying, you got to come up here. Then my sophomore year, I didn't run because I had a knee operation from surfing. The knots on my knees from me paddling had created calcium deposits under my kneecap, and they were grooving out and tearing the tendons and stuff. So pretty big deal surgery to my right knee. That healed, but it ruined the season back then. They didn't have arthroscopic surgery or anything like that. Then got in decent shape over the summer and showed up to Humboldt, and worth it. I'm glad they...
Yeah, you were a multi-time All-American.
Yeah.
Where did your time move down in junior college?
Yeah, I ran 152, the Southern Cal meet, and then in the state meet, Modesto, I didn't do well. I overtrained that week. Even though the coach called me, I was doing extra stuff in the morning and stuff, and I was just dead by the time I got there, and he recognized it. But yeah, and my mile time, I think, went just under 4:20, but I didn't run the mile that much, and we had a good mile relay team that I'd run on a lot. My quarter mile time was 49 something. Yeah, and ran the 2 mile a bit. Then when I got to Humboldt, cross country was great. We had amazing places to train. Sand dunes, we all thought we were Herb Elliott and Percy Cerruti at Portsea in Australia. We had obviously the trails and the redwoods behind the school everywhere. That was a halfway decent cross country season. And then there was a tryout for Devil Take the Hindmost race, which is a strange race where whoever's in last is eliminated until there's three guys who battle it out at the end. And it was for the examiner games. We were driving home, Gary, myself, and this other guy, Dana Johnson. We had heard about it. We thought, oh, let's stop at San Francisco State or wherever it was held. I think it was at San Francisco State. And we'll see if we can qualify. Got in the race. I didn't know anybody or anything. I had a pair of spikes. But yeah, we just took off, heard no splits. And all of a sudden I finished, and I think I got second. And guy comes over and tells me around 4:14. I was like, what? Are you kidding? That was a big leap for me. And then I thought, ooh, maybe there's something, I can do something. Slowly brought it down. I ran 1,500, 350 that season, 407, and 152 flat, I think, in the half, and 49.2 or something in the 440. Got fourth in the NC2As. And yeah, it was, then the next year, I dropped it further. And yeah, and my senior year, I covered a half, and I like the 800 meters because you get to subtract 0.7 of a second. 150.3 sounds better. And yeah, but yeah, yes.
I want to talk about the life as college athlete on, again, that era of the cross country teams. A lot of places are known as the joker guys, less serious athletes and having fun and a little bit weird and not understood. But this elimination race, I certainly on the Olympic Games, the cycling race where they drop is really exciting to watch. It's quite well known, but every time, okay, there's a sprint and you don't know who's going to be eliminated till the last half second because they're moving around. But on foot, what do you remember? How did that work? Were there just check marks?
I just knew, don't be in last place.
Yeah,
so
just
in the middle of the pack or something, and always looking around. Waste a lot of energy looking around to make sure that someone's not going to surprise you. I think a guy from Stanford won the race. I'm not positive who it was, but I got second. And he had taken off. He obviously had run it before, and he took off with about a lap and a half to go, instead of waiting till just before you're crossing 3/4 and then running the last lap with the three of us. But it was just fun running indoors on a wooden track, that back then.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing for people to do in middle school and high school, not the competitive runners. It's a fun thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, they had quite a few meets used to have it. I know at least the examiner meet, because we ran a few indoor meets in the Bay Area when we were in college, Gary and myself. Gary ran the 3 mile or the 2 mile, and I'd run the 1,000 half, or if they had a Devil Take the Hindmost. It was fun back in those days, the old board tracks that made a lot of noise and squeaked, and chips of plywood are flying up in your face and stuff. Yeah.
For many people in any situation, the friends that you make in university become lifelong friends, certainly with team sports and things like cross country and long drives together in the van. There's a lot of bonding. That certainly comes across from you in your book and everything with your teammates. How did you adjust to, I got to take school a little more serious. The running's fun. You had good friends. How'd all that go?
Yeah, the friendships, bonding you make as teammates. Hopefully that comes through in the book. But yeah, it lasts forever. From Humboldt, getting to the Bay Area was about a 7-hour drive. And we had, for cross country, a vehicle called the Checker, British built. It would hold 12 people. You'd fill it with the team, basically. And it was a little crowded and get very stuffy and smelly on those trips. And we'd head to the Bay Area and spend the night in a motel somewhere and race the next day, and then usually drive back that Saturday afternoon or evening. It was a little quieter going back because people were tired and sleeping, trying to sleep. heading down, it was useless to try and read or study. You just sat around and told stories and lied to each other, that sort of thing. But you built friendships that have lasted to this day. We still meet on a Zoom call once a month. And most of the old guys are still there. We've lost a few, unfortunately, teammates, but most of them still log on to the call. And yeah, you reach a point where it's like, oh, I got to get serious about this education. I can remember I had my second semester at Humboldt, I had a geology class, and the lab where we had the lab class was, and I think it went from 3 to 5, and it overlooked the track, the stadium. You could get a glimpse of it. I used to spend more time watching guys working out than paying attention to what I was doing in the class and wishing I could be out there, because I knew that 5 o'clock was going to be colder and possibly wetter, and I still had to do a workout. I was an art major and a history minor, and being the art department, athletes were looked down upon because, as I used to get lectured by one of the professors, that you're taking money for sports rather than education, when the art department suffers and stuff. But I had a couple of good, one who had roomed with a half miler who went to the Olympics, and so we used to talk. I used to ask him questions about what was the guy like and stuff like that. And then obviously all the other classes you had to really buckle down and study. And fortunately, Gary was a good student, so he's a good influence on me. And we roomed together for 2.5 years. Then he left and went in the Army. He was a good influence as far as studying.
Gary was a conscientious objector, and so were you. Let's tell people about how that was. Now, what year did you graduate and then you got mandatory service? How'd you manage that?
I didn't know Gary felt that strong. He went in and was going to run for the Army track team. And I guess when he got there, he said he wasn't going to do anything and he was going to be a conscientious objector. And I thought, good luck with that. As I wrote to him, said, good luck with that. I had strong feelings since probably my sophomore year in college, when I paid attention to the news and realized what was going on. So with the help of a friend and a fellow track team member, Dennis O'Reilly, he later became a judge. He was a lawyer. He helped me with my conscientious objector application. I ended up being the first from Ventura County to be granted CO status. At the time, I didn't know, but it was pretty daunting. I got letters from the right people, a campus priest. Dennis O'Reilly wrote numerous letters. Coach Hunt and his wife wrote one. My dad wouldn't write one because he objected. He was a World War II vet and that. And I went down for my interview and was grilled by a bunch of older gentlemen who probably had all served during World War II or the Korean War. Was grilled and asked a lot of questions and stuff. And I guess I must have convinced them. I participated in a lot of campus demonstrations, that sort of thing. And I remember, I think it was Gary, joined SDS, Students for Democratic Society, which was really blacklisted campus group. But we thought we'd meet girls there. To the first meeting, it was more just guys ranting and raving and raising their fists. So we didn't go back to too many of those. But yeah, I was granted my CO status, and then I got the job. What's funny is I wasn't granted my CO status at first. I got a notice that I was working in agriculture or something, and I didn't question. I don't even remember what it was, or age, I don't know. But I thought, at least I'm not getting drafted. And then I went my 5th year and got teaching credential because I didn't know what else to do with my art degree. And thought, I'm not so sure I want to be a starving artist. Maybe I could teach. I got a job teaching art for a year and coaching track and cross country at Atascadero High School. And for the lofty sum of $5,000, no assistance, nothing. That's good distance runners. I wasn't the best pole vault coach. I'll admit that now. And I apologize to the athletes who were there, but it was not a great program, but we did okay. Partway through the year, I got my notice that I had to fulfill my alternative service. I had a choice between the school for mentally challenged youth or working at Stanford's psychiatric facility. And if you read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, you're like, no, that's not me. Avila Beach was 12 miles away from where we were living in San Luis at the time. So while my wife was working on her master's degree at Cal Poly, so I took that and got hired. Unfortunately, at the time, your conscientious objectors were not allowed to earn more than $1.25 an hour. You were going to only work 4 hours a day, and I ended up working a good 8 for sure. You didn't receive housing, food, or uniform or anything, so we weren't very well off. And then, for some reason, about 6-7 months in, I received a letter from my draft board, selective service system, saying due to the, I think it's Levitt versus the U.S. selective service system, you're hereby reclassified. You completed your alternative service. And I had no idea. Wow, man. Started studying. I called my friend Dennis O'Reilly, who was by then a big time lawyer in Sacramento. And he roughly said, let me look into it. And he said, I think you're free and I'll look into the case. And there was another conscientious objector working at the school also, and he didn't get the letter. We were, really upset and couldn't figure out why he still had to stay. And finally, I got the nerve to call my draft board, and they said, oh, congratulations, Mr. Engel, you fulfilled your alternative service. The military in the U.S., thank you. And that was it. So I went into the principal and said, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm sorry, but I'm out of here. And he was gracious about it and started traveling, and I've traveled ever since, basically.
Wow. Let's talk about a couple things that happened there at Humboldt before you left.
Yeah.
The film, The Harriers. There's a long story there, but anybody had to say, I'll put the link up so people can see. And you've gone on through your career to create some iconic Why I Run, the Nike ad. There's some great stuff, but The Harriers was some kind of amateur project that has over the years turned into all kinds of stuff. But it was the Humboldt team, and the people doing it they weren't part of the team. They were just at Humboldt. Tell us the story of The Harrier.
Yeah. A theater arts major, a film major, Dean Monroe, and Mike Phillips was the cameraman. They came up with this short synopsis of this film. And Dean had been a pretty good high school runner down in the Bay Area. Mike Phillips wasn't a runner at all, but a good cameraman. He was doing his master's thesis, and he was going to produce a film about running. And we read the thesis, and it was very airy-fairy and just very poetic. And we were like, man, this is stupid. So none of us wanted to participate, really. So he would recruit anybody who was willing to help on days that he couldn't get any of us. But most of the time, probably 80% of the film, 85% of the film is him. You'd come around the corner during our training, and he would be there, and the camera would be in the bushes or whatever. And they'd just be yelling, don't look at the camera, don't look at the camera. And so, and like the runs on the beach and stuff, they had a Volkswagen that they'd taken the front end off of, and Mike Phillips laid there on the bed and had the camera and would follow us as we're sprinting up and down the beach during workouts and stuff, or in the hills and the trails or wherever. We'd come around the corner and there he was. They did stage the last race, a faked race that I don't think we were there that day, but we used to do some killer hill repeats, sand dune repeats, and we'd divide up into teams and we'd run like a relay. You'd go up, hand off, guy would come back, and it would be killer. Guys would literally, you'd kind of run until somebody threw up or something. And so that was all captured in the film. But in the end, Pete Pedrosa is one of the stars of the film. But he was a roommate, but he used to always, he volunteered. So ended up being in 90% of the shots. And at the end, when they had a screening of the film, to the university, and they gave out these awards and stuff. At the end of it, we were all so pissed that we didn't show up to show me because it turned out really cool. And Pete walked out very proud, glad I showed up. And we were all upset because we were not very cooperative.
Missed it, yeah. Yeah, Chariots of Fire has the running on the beach in slow motion. This has all kind of different speeds and speeded up things, and it's black and white. And yeah, the original anyhow is black and white and really captures that era of just kooky and what is going on here. It's really cool. Yeah,
the shoes, the outfits you ran in. Yeah, there was no rain gear or anything like that. You just ran in a cotton sweatshirt that weighed a ton after it got wet.
Yeah.
Funny thing is that I was helping them with the titles. What I wanted to do was too hard and stuff. But the musicians, 3 guys were there, and they literally recorded the entire soundtrack in one night. Drank and smoked a lot, but they finished it in one night. It was amazing. They just kept running the film. And I finally gave up, went home, went to bed. It was 2 or 3 in the morning. And they were still going. But yeah, it was a fun experience, and it's grown. Like you said, it's become mythical. And they show it everywhere. I shot an updated version for the school and directed in 2015, maybe, called Running Away. And that's out there too. But that was an updated color version.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little too soulful. That was my fault. The soundtrack was done through a connection. My younger brother worked with Big Bad Voodoo Daddies, and they did, if you know them, they did the soundtrack for free, which was great.
Wow.
And yeah.
Oh, so what was it like for you then? You were married when you got your teaching certificate. You're going to go travel. What happened with your running? And you traveled for a while. And with your running, and it was 72, 71?
Yes, yeah.
So you didn't make the Olympic qualifying standard for the half mile or anything. So that was like, okay, adventure, yeah.
Yeah, even then I didn't know what an Olympic standard was or anything. But yeah, I wanted to just travel. Went to Australia and got involved in a club there, running club. I met some guys, and there was a Scottish guy, an English guy, and some Australians. And actually, Ron Clark, his son, Marcus Clark, was the youngest member of the team in the club. So I got to meet his father, Ron Clark, which was fantastic. And we actually set the Australian, I have the certificate still somewhere, the Australian national record for the 10-man 24-hour relay. Back then, which was cool. Not very many teams had ever attempted it. And then a really good team, Chris Wardlaw and D. Costello and those guys, a year later, just clobbered our record. Yeah, I competed, and didn't train as much as I should have, or could have, but because I was still like surfing and stuff. And and then decided to travel overland from Australia to Europe, by Southeast Asia, India, Nepal, Middle East, eventually arriving in Europe a year and a half later, and just bumming our way with backpacks and, our thumb out, any way we could get from one place to the next. But visited some really exciting places, some that can't go to anymore, and so many that have changed. Burma is now Myanmar, and those kind of things. Nepal was great, but I didn't run, obviously, during that time because traveling. And eventually arrived back in New York. My brother was working there, and he had just designed Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run album. So he was a big deal. And that got me interested in getting into advertising or design. I took some courses at UCLA just to get a better understanding and put my portfolio together. And eventually someone was desperate enough that they hired me, and it ended up eventually working for Wieden & Kennedy, which has the Nike and ESPN accounts. That was a great experience. And a lot of it was based on the fact that I had running experience, and I knew people at Nike because I had been given equipment and stuff over a few years. So people like Jeff Hollister and guys like that. I ended up working on the running account, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah. You won a lot of awards in creative arts and in media and television production and so on. I guess you're more successful in that than in your running. On the 24-hour relay, I ran one of those in Cairo. It was amateur. I think the Hash House Harrier team, we won it. We actually had runners, but it's an interest for people that haven't done it. You just run a mile at a time. So you can do it, and you can just step it back to 95% and really hit times. I think the one we did was started maybe 4 in the afternoon. And then so 12 hours later, when it's 4 in the morning and your body temperature's it's an interesting thing to go through. Even if you're not an ultra runner, you can still do it. Yeah.
In Melbourne, Australia, we started ours at 9 in the morning, and only because I had started one at Humboldt and dropped out when it started raining, and that the guys who finished they loved reminding me the fact that I dropped out, and a couple other guys dropped out. So we started at 9 in the morning just because I thought you got the whole day, and then at night, and you get to look forward to the sunrise. And I think that one I averaged about 5:05 or something like that per mile, maybe a little faster. I can't remember. But they had those postal competitions that were started by Track and Field News and Distance Running News. They were great. And there was another one, 2-man 10-mile relay that Bill Scobie and myself, our last year at Humboldt, ran. And we ended up having the fastest time in the nation and the second fastest ever behind Jim Ryan and John Lawson, who had run it a few years prior. So it was alternating 440s or quarter miles. So you literally, it seemed like he just finished, and I'd turn around and Bill would be coming down the straightaway. He averaged 61.2 and I averaged 63.1. And yeah, it was tough. We were on fire though, but I just remember that feeling of, oh man, your hands on your hips, you bent over, tired. And all of a sudden you're looking, they'd say, get ready. And here comes Bill. And you're like, oh man, grab the baton and take off again. And there was a line of guys with stopwatches timing each of the laps. But yeah, those were fun. They just made training a little more interesting.
Postal meets, that's something that younger people won't know about. There were all kind of distances, and that 2-man 10-mile was pretty unique because you had to touch a baton 20 times.
Yeah, I was proud of that effort. So was Bill. Probably one of our best efforts we had in college.
As you said, you're in touch with your teammates. And what about Coach Hunt? How long did he stay at? And when you were traveling, that time, the communications was different then. Did you kind of just check out and check back in when you got back from years of traveling?
Yeah. I actually, it's funny, after being gone for 4 years, I think. Yeah, it was about almost 4 years. I lived at my parents' house in Ventura. My mom answers the phone and says, oh, it's Gary Tuttle. He wants to talk to you. And I had literally been there just a few hours, but he'd heard through one of my brothers that I was coming back. And all he said was, hey, you want to run? Gary, I've been gone for 4 years, and that's all you got to say. And he said, well, do you? No, this is all I'll run by. And his running shop was not very far from my parents' house. So yeah, he came by and I hadn't run. So I found an old pair of shoes and shorts and a t-shirt, and we took off, and didn't take long before he was gone and hobbled back to the house, but got back into it, thankfully, with his help and Bill Scobie, who had moved to Ventura and was working for the fire department. Together, I had plenty of guys to train with. But it was all distance running stuff. And so it was all new to me. And in hindsight, I wish I'd have stuck to running the half and the mile and done more speed work. But running with those guys, just a lot of long, seemingly slow stuff. And I don't think I did myself any service. I did a lot of garbage miles just because I thought back then I got to run 100 miles a week or 90 miles a week. And it was just,
You're still only doing half of what Scobie's doing, right?
yeah, exactly. Or Gary. But I'd meet Gary in the afternoon or Bill, and Gary would have done his hard work out that morning. So that afternoon, I could keep up with him and stuff. And we'd occasionally do some long intervals or hill repeats, that sort of thing. And yeah, it got me back into it and got me at a 2:22 marathon. Was hoping for about 2:18, but I just blew up but my last mile was 8:57. So it was painful.
Where'd you run that 2:22?
In Scottsdale, Arizona. It was a dead flat course. I picked a very flat course because I figured if I'm going to do this. And I had run one prior, 2:32 or something at Culver City, which is a horrible place to run. I thought smoggy and traffic and everything. But I thought, it wasn't so hard. Funny enough, I would never drink during a marathon because I had this stupid idea that I'll get a side ache or something. So that coupled with, I remember we were running in Ed Mendoza back then, this end of 79. Ed Mendoza had a watch and I was in that group with him. He ended up winning and running like 2:14. And he said, we're on 2:15 pace. And suddenly I just realized, oh, I'm in over my head. And it caught up with me.
Okay, back then, it's 79. That time, I had a lot of friends from college in Pennsylvania that went to the Olympic trials in Buffalo and across here to Canada. You qualified in 79.
Yeah.
Did you go to the trials?
No.
Oh,
I left for Australia to travel, and I on the whole boycott and stuff. Not that I've made the team, but I hopefully would have improved my marathon time. And previous to that, I had run the qualifying for the World Cross Country team in 77. And it wasn't that long. It was like probably 7 months after I'd returned from traveling, or 6 months. And Gary convinced me to go to Oakland where they held it on, fortunately, a grass golf course, cross country race. Really wasn't fair. And I was able to utilize what speed I had and to qualify. There were a couple guys ahead of me who made the team. They would take 10 individuals. And Terry Cotton broke his foot. Chuck Smead got sick, and I kept moving up. Gary kept saying, just keep running, hang in there, and you might make the team. And suddenly I got called and said, do you want to go? And yeah. So it was a big deal. I got my ass handed to me in Dusseldorf at the World Cross Country meet. I remember before the race, John Anderson was on the team, Rick Rojas, Jeff Wells. There were a lot of really talented team. Tom Wysocki. Tom and I were probably the novices because Gary was coming off of a 7th place finish the year before. And getting advice saying, don't worry, they'll go out fast, but just hang in there and it'll settle down. And so I was ready. I went out fast and thought, okay, when's it going to settle down? And it never did. And but then we went to Cinque Malini, which is the 5 miles race outside of Milan, small town, San Vittorio, I think. And it has an unbelievable history of Olympic champions winning the race. Billy Mills and all these, Philbert Bay. So we went. And I was sick most of that week, but I obviously recuperated enough to where I ran. I ran a decent race. I think I got 24th, but I think Tuttle got 4th. I think Murda Shifter won it, got 2nd. John Walker or Rod Dixon got 3rd, I think, and Gary was 4th. And it was another one of those things. But it's the strangest race called the Cinque Malini. But you run through 5 different flour mills, grinding mills, and they're like water wheels that are turning. And people are literally, you're running through their house. It's crazy. And people are eating. I remember this family's eating lunch or dinner. And the course is lined, and because it had rained a lot, they had shredded paper down in the mud. I don't know, I found it worse, but all these Italians lining the race. It's like the Tour de France. They're right in your ear screaming. And I remember that was funny. They were screaming, "Die USA, die USA." And I thought, I am dying. I am dying. You don't need to remind me. And then hitting that "Go USA."
Wow.
But it was the funniest race. We had no idea what to expect because we didn't run the course beforehand. But afterwards that night, it was a lot of fun. But talk about the changing times. Back then, Gary said, "Hey, they're handing out money to runners downstairs in the bar. Let's go." And I said, "They're not going to give me any money." He said, "Hey, you never know. Just get in line." So down the coach at the time, the USA coach said, "If anybody takes money, I'm going to have you banned," and all this. So we waited until he was out of the way and went down there, and these guys were all getting money and getting invites to other races and stuff and getting cash. And Gary, I think, got maybe $400 or something. And I refused to get in line, but Murda Shifter, Yifter the Shifter, they used to call him because of his amazing kicking speed. He had a wad of US $100 bills, and he was buying drinks for everybody in the bar.
That's great.
And everybody's like, looking to make sure no officials came through, especially US officials, hide any money. But yeah.
Do you think the coach was a little bit of, okay, I'm going to step out. You heard my pitch. I'm going to step out of here. And he really wasn't policing it?
No, this guy was pretty straight arrow. Yeah. Like after the race, trading uniforms, he said, "I don't want any of you to give away the USA uniform." I had an Australian uniform from when I'd lived in Australia. I wanted an Irish one. So I traded a guy a jersey. And then I wrote to the AAU and said, "Hey, I traded and they sent me a new one, which I gave to a friend of mine who has a running shop in Arcata." But no, he was pretty straight arrow. And so I don't know what he could have done, but a lot of the guys were a lot more John Anderson and people like that were accomplished runners, Boston Marathon winner and stuff. They weren't too worried. They didn't seem too worried. But I know Tom Isaki and I were shy about getting in line and stuff. But it was different times, but fun times.
Let's talk about some of the just name dropping then. And you're a really successful career. You ran your own business, creative and still involved in things, I think. Still surfing. Just if people aren't familiar and then want to check out, there's Michael Jordan ads. Who else did you work with? And how did your career as a runner, was that something that came up when you talked to the athletes that you were working as talent in ads?
Yeah. They could figure out from not only the concept, but the way you'd want to frame a shot and stuff and ask them what to do. They go, "You used to run," or some of them knew me, not that many, but a few. When you're pitching them the idea, I'd say, "When I ran, we used to do this." And they go, "Yeah, we still do that," and stuff. I remember one of the ads in that "Why Do I Run" series, the guys took off their shirts. I was hot. And we were filming in the hills around Stanford University where the Nike farm team was at the time. They obviously were wearing Nike shoes and shorts, but took off their shirts. And I didn't think anything of it because that's what I'd have done. I remember when we got back and finished the edit and showed it to the bigwigs at Nike, one of them, he leaned over and said, "We make T-shirts too, running shirts too." And I said, "Yeah, but we're going for something authentic." And he's, "Yeah."
Did they use it?
Oh, yeah. And I was lucky enough to partner with some really talented people and got to work with Bo Jackson, Michael Jordan, Bob Kennedy, really the first American and first non-African to break 13 minutes, two-time Olympian, together with ESPN, Dan O'Brien and those kind of people.
Yeah. So one of the "Why Do I Run," I think you have the story about you interviewed the 12th man on the team.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great story for everybody who's a runner and a casual runner. And it's a great thing. Can you just tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. My younger brother, Bob, was running on a not very good team at Gladstone High School. My brother, I think, was the number one runner. And they had a strange course, ran along this canal and then back into the school around. And there was a kid on the team, Jerry Sawyer, who I had heard stories from my brother that is not all there. He would run and he would be so far behind when he into the finish. The flags were taken down. No one was there to hand out popsicle sticks or anything, those tongue depressors and stuff. And I'd wait for him and say, hey, way to go, Jerry. And I remember one day I just asked him, I said, Jerry, why do you run? You come in last all the time and you're so far behind. And he just looked at me, a straight face. He just goes, for the glory. And at the time I laughed and was thinking, what an idiot. And then I realized glory for individuals is whatever they assume it to be or want it to be. And you can run a 5-hour marathon, a 6-hour marathon, and you've achieved your glory, or you can run a sub-4 mile and that's your glory. And it's whatever you get out of running is the most important thing. And if you're having fun, you're probably the best runner out there. And if you're the one having the most fun. I told that story to some people, and I told it to the guys at Nike, and they said, oh, that's great. So did a bunch of ads. Funny enough, that whole campaign, they were going to fire Wieden Kennedy and take them off the Nike running account because they were unhappy with the direction some of the ads were going. And I wasn't working on it at the time. So I got called in and said, you're the ex-runner, you're going to go out and pitch. Jeff Hollister had just returned from a running reunion where they had shown the Harriers film. And he came, he said, oh my God, it's the most amazing story. You went to Humboldt, were you in? And I said, of course, he was a lot younger. So, oh yeah, now I remember. We got to do something with that. So that was it. Basically, a lot of the idea. And I did a pitch to them just saying, let's get back to the basics and ask people why they run. There's so many reasons, from Alberto Salazar remembering sitting in his high school science class and hearing that Prefontaine had just died. And that really motivated him to, I don't know, Jerry Sawyer, who was the 10th man on the team, coming in last and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it was great. And funny enough, we took the beach scene of us sprinting on the beach and did a spot out of that. We used the actual footage, but it ended up winning this award. And the guy, the commentator who was giving out the awards, was commenting. He said, I can't believe it looks so authentic, the way they're dressed, the film, everything. He thought, and
We just got it.
Say, we just bought the footage from the director and edited it for that spot. It was actually 2 spots we ended up doing. And he said, and only Nike would be brave enough to allow an Adidas shoe to appear in their ad. And all of a sudden, I was like, are you kidding? So I instantly called the editor after we got our award, and he called the editor. I said, can you go back and look? And he looked, he goes, oh my God, there's a single or 2 frames maybe of Mark Byers' shoe coming in and going out of frame. The naked eye doesn't really hardly register it. I don't know how this guy saw it.
No, somebody saw it.
Yeah, I never said anything to Nike. And
Yeah, you got enough trouble with your,
But they were very supportive and a great client to work on and work with.
It's interesting, the one thing you said, what about competition for you? When we can feel that in our professional careers and other things we do in life, but how did you off-ramp? How easy was that to let go once you just skipped the Olympic trial, said, we're not going to the Olympics anyhow, and then you really weren't doing much? Competitive running went off the main focus there. How did you adjust to that?
I don't know, when you're young, you think, I got years ahead of me. So you make those dumb decisions without thinking too deeply about it all. that was where I was. And I got back into it, obviously running again. And to this day, I still scold myself and regret that I didn't keep it up. I don't know what I'd have done, but it would have been nice to find out. Yeah, those regrets, my advice, and that I gave my son, he wasn't a runner, he was a rower, national champion, rode for the U.S. and Berkeley, UC Berkeley. I said, just don't have any regrets when you're done. And when he finally gave it up, he said, I have no regrets. And he stopped and never really raced again. But for me, it was like, yeah, those regrets, they gnaw at you. My advice is always take it as far as you can go. And when you're not having fun, not enjoying it anymore, or I don't know, the drive isn't there anymore, okay, hang it up. But the worst feeling in the world is to look back and go, woulda, coulda, shoulda, or whatever that term is. And to this day, it gnaws at me.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm glad because that competitive spirit carried over into business and just life in general that you gain from running. So I'm forever grateful, but most of all for just the friends that I've made, the teammates that I'm still in touch with, whether they're here or English runners, Australian runners, and obviously all the U.S. runners that I'm still in touch with. And we talk and we still lie about how good we were and all that kind of stuff. And it's as though we're still out for an easy jog, just talking whenever we meet up.
Yeah, that's great. It was a great path. It's very fun to hear your introspections of this. You're pretty open about it. And it's an interesting bumpy ride. Sounds like with your career, you just hit home run after home run, and you were in a place where people trusted you, and maybe was there a lot of pressure?
Oh yeah, I can remember there were ads that had finished, that were completed and ready to go to air, and Nike would look at it, and you'd look at Phil Knight, and he'd go, not good enough, and it'd be like, back then, $250,000 is a lot of money. And go, we can do better. And of course, you'd look at it later and go, yeah, maybe I should have done this or that. But yeah, it's very competitive. And of course, everybody's out to steal your accounts and stuff like that. And you keep wanting to one up, do something better. And the athletes, like a lot of them, Jordan was a real special athlete. He knew. But a lot of them come in and they're a little distrusting because they don't want to come off looking bad or silly in any way. And so you've got to gain their trust, and you can't let them down and in any way make them look silly or goofy or anything. And so, yeah, they place a lot of trust in you. But you also, in that business, advertising, you're only as good as your last ad. There is pressure.
Throughout running, and then your professional career is creative, reading, writing, talking to people, getting to know people, and then trying to get them to, promote, have them be their best, be seen as their best. What happened? What was it that caused you to say, okay, I'm going to make this book, The Running in the Redwoods, and how'd that come together?
Yeah, running behind the redwood curtain, because that was a term used back then. You were so cut off from the rest of the world that obviously take on the Iron Curtain. But Gary and I went to the World Championships at Budapest in 2023, I think it was. Yeah. We were in the bar and we met these guys from East Bakersfield High School. They were ex-runners our age, a little younger than us. And they said, hey, join us for a beer. They knew who Gary was. And I introduced myself, and they were like, oh, yeah, now we remember. And they seemed to know a lot about the history of Humboldt State and the runners, and they knew Scobie and all those kind of stuff. And they'd heard a lot of the stories. And they had just written a book called Blades, and it was about their East Bakersfield High School team. If you know where Bakersfield is in Southern California in the Central Valley, it's oil and heat. That's about all I know about that town or city. And they'd done a book. It was mostly results and stuff. And they said, "Oh, got so many great stories. You should write a book about Humboldt." But yeah, all right. So I emailed ex-teammates and stuff, as many as I could find, which is most of them. And they said, "Yeah, we'll send you stories." And of course, they never do. So you have to get it started. And eventually, Gary was good about it. He sent some stuff, and I posted to the other guys and say, "All right, this is where it's going. And these are the subjects, about your experiences and stuff like that." And some of them would be very, I don't know, analytical. And it was, I don't know, I hate to say it, but boring, because it was like almost a list of what they did. I'd have to turn it into prose.
That wasn't what you had in mind when you started.
And but most of them were good. It took a while, over a year, to get a lot of the stories. And guys would send photos, because I didn't have very many, which was great, because even they'd post a photo to the group, and that would suddenly bring back a memory of, "Oh, I remember that day. I remember that race." And so you got more and more stuff. And then we did, obviously, the eulogies for people like Mark Conover, who had unfortunately passed away, and Randy Cooper, and a lot of the athletes that had passed away, and Coach Hunt, of course, which was sad. He passed in 2019 at 93. So I got everybody, and they all contributed. Then the editing came hard. Gary came over for a week and stayed, and we kept going over the book and finding spelling errors. Finally, it came out, and I got it published. We had a book signing last February back up at Humboldt. They had a big halftime basketball game for all the Humboldt old boys, as we're called. They're given that name by Joanne Hunt, Coach's wife. They had a big ceremony at the halftime. Then we had a book signing at the running shop, the jogging shop, Mike Williams' shop in Arcata, which is a running museum to Humboldt State and Humboldt running. It was really well attended. I was amazed. Some of the old guys that I'd spoken to through emails and stuff, they hadn't seen on Zoom or something, when they'd come in the door and see Vince, and I'd be like, "Oh," I feel like trying to remember. And then they'd smile, or they'd say something. You go, "Oh, I remember Dan Mullins." Yeah. And guys like that. And it was fun. We sold, I don't know, 2,500 copies or something, which I'm amazed at. Just fun, though. Available on Amazon if anybody's interested. Running Behind the Redwood Curtain. Gary's awfully good at promoting that book.
He pulls it up and gives the cover, but it'll be on this podcast website. It'll get mentioned again. So that, it's easy to find on Amazon. And how much do you ever get back to the U.S. now?
Usually about every couple of years. Our son is married and gone back to visit him. And then I went back for the reunion last February. So every couple of years, go back to see family, because my family, which is 7 brothers and sisters, 8 in total, we get together, which is pretty amazing feat. But yeah. And then I always see all the old runners. Don Makla, an ex-Humboldt runner, Mark Byers, and they keep me posted on who's doing what. Scobie and Gary, of course. Gary's not as good with technology, but Bill will send me stuff or call and say, "Hey, did you hear so-and-so passed away, or so-and-so did this?" And but we meet first Sunday of every month on Zoom, 11 o'clock on Sundays Pacific Standard Time, and 8 o'clock here. And we meet, and it's usually anywhere from a dozen to 18 old teammates on the call. And that old joke of, as Joanne Hunt said, you got to start numbering your stories. You can get through them quicker. And Scobie's always yelling out, "Story number 14 or story number 253. Expecting a laugh.
Yeah, it's great. The reunions, that's a pretty organized one and regular. I know a lot of the Villanova guys, there's a Penn Relays reunion from a lot of people that were part of that era, and the Villanova guys are always down there every year and get a reunion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do get jealous when there's big meets. I go to the meets here or they're on TV. I went to the Paris Diamond League and then obviously
Yeah.
others and a couple of indoor meets, European indoor meets. But the U.S. meets that we're talking and guys are saying, oh, we're going to go to the U.S. championships. And you're like, oh, I wish.
Yeah. Yeah, another one. Boy, the 800 meters is just hot right now, huh?
Oh, yeah. I'm just waiting for someone to go sub 140. I'm that A-Rob from Canada.
Yeah.
Beast. He looks like he could do it. He just fades the finish. And
Oh, yeah. When Yoni can just has another gear that let us all, because he's defending world champ and A-Rob, and he's got to. It's not too good to lose it once you got to figure something else out. He's tried running from the back. He's tried running from the front.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a tough race.
Yeah.
I think it used to be the 400 was the tough race. Now I think it's the 800.
Yeah. 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 It's neat. You smile through all your memories. And even when you're talking about what you should have done and what you could have done, you're still smiling, reflecting back. It's very cool to talk and spend time with you, Vince.
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky.
All right.
Yeah, the older you get, the more you realize, wow, maybe it wasn't so bad after all.
Yeah. Congratulations on all your running accomplishments. Your
Thank you.
career's inspiring, and it's great the way you reflect on it humbly, but obviously with fondness and not too many regrets, if any.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah. One last running experience. We were doing an ad in New Zealand. This is when I was in Australia. And we went over to Auckland and we broke for lunch and I hadn't run at all that day. So I went to Cornwall Park or One Tree Hill, which is a famous running venue in Auckland where everybody shows up. And lunchtime parking lot was empty. So then I thought, oh, great, I'll go for a leisure. I knew the route that they ran. It's 4 or 5 miles. And to this beautiful park. And I'm putting on my shoes, and all of a sudden, a sports car pulls next to me, and out steps John Walker, and he goes, "Hey, you going to do a lap?" "Yeah, but I think you'd run a little faster than me." He says, "No, don't worry. He'll be fine." And he comes over, and he sticks his hat out and says, "Name's John Walker." I was like, it's for me. Olympic champion.
Yeah.
It was so funny. I just remember that and telling him, he was like, man, don't think anything of it. It was funny. And I was trying my hardest to keep up and not breathe too heavily. But it was fun. He was great. And at the end, he shook my hand and says, "Thanks for the lap. I'm going to do a couple of shakeouts and thanks." And that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the essence of Kiwi personality, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Very easy.
Thanks for all your time, Ben. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
Go on.
Keep running.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.